Anna Grabow, welcome to the Rich Equation podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here too. When I started doing some research on you and, asked you to be on the podcast and starting to prepare, I thought this was going to be such a great topic, not only for the audience, but a lot even for me and my journey and what I am experiencing in my life right now. And so you have such a great, rich experience, which we'll get into in a minute here, all your background and how you got here. But also you have focused to talk about purpose. Mm-hmm. You've chosen to talk about the subject matter of purpose, and you have a podcast, and I'll let you speak about that as well. And we'll get into all of that. But, purpose has been a really interesting subject for me, and it gnaws at me in different ways. And I'm super excited to dive into it and just have a great, deep conversation.
I love it. Talking about purpose is something I could do all day. That's why I made a podcast. So
exactly, right? So let's just get into it. Why don't you first start by kind of giving a little bit of background on yourself and tell us about your history and how you got here into this work.
Sure, absolutely. So what I do currently is I am a coach, I'm a business mentor, a podcast host, and sort of a marketing specialist of sorts, and also on my own spiritual path. But I started wanting to be a professional ballet dancer. So way back when I was 16, I moved to New York City by myself and started attending a professional ballet academy and was dancing like 11 hours a day. And I loved it, right? And I felt super on purpose. I felt like I was exploring an art form and, gonna change the world with dance and all of that. But then after a couple of years in New York, I started to feel differently about dance. And so I thought maybe I needed to go to a new place. So I moved to Sweden, which is where my dad is from. And I lived in my grandparents' basement for 2 years. And I did auditions all around Europe trying to get a job as a ballet dancer. And during this time, I realized that the ballet had left me. There was no more ballet inside of me, no more drive for it. So I did the unthinkable and I just quit with no other option. So I just quit flat out and I moved back home to Los Angeles, and I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew that I wanted to help people, because the biggest problem with ballet was that I was alone in a room looking at a mirror all day. And I realized I'm not going to make a difference by staring at myself all day. And I really don't feel like it's doing anything. I'm not moving the needle in any way. I'm not affecting anyone. I can't just be alone. I have to be around people. So my next thought was the medical field. So I became an EMT and I started working on an ambulance, but doing 911 calls isn't really suited for someone who has a history of anxiety and depression. So I quickly got too anxious on the ambulance. So I started working as an EMT at an amusement park. Then I thought maybe not EMT. So I became a behavioral therapist for kids with special needs. And I went to their homes and I worked with young kids ages 4 to 11. And then I worked at a school as a behavioral therapist and as a teacher's assistant. And during this time, especially when I was working with special needs kids, I knew that coaching existed because I was listening to Tony Robbins. I started listening to TED Talks, and I knew that these people who were speaking, they moved me. That's how I knew I needed to quit dance, was because I heard a TED Talk where they said, what is it that you enjoy doing? And the only thing I could think about was how the previous day I had a conversation with my friend and she smiled and said that it meant so much that I was in her life and that I could listen to her. And so I knew that was something that I had to explore. So I fell in love with this idea of speaking and coaching. And so I immediately jumped into studying law of attraction, getting a coaching certification. Then I started working for coaches thinking, okay, I just need to learn the world. I worked for a coach who had, a big 8-figure business, and I was on her sales team. I started leading the sales team and bringing in like $200K a month for her. But it was giving me migraines, and it was so weird because I felt so physically ill while I was doing it. So I had to leave. And from there, I finally started finding where I could do my own thing in the coaching space. I was able to work with more coaches and help them build their programs and start helping new coaches build programs, all the things that I'd seen. And I got to start my own podcast and speak about things I'd learned. But I will say I'm very much in the beginning. I am learning what life is all about as I go along. And so I'm continuously a student. I stumbled upon breath work last year, actually.
That's a whole nother topic we can get into.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's a lot, but that's kind of who I am and where I've been in essence.
Well, you know, what's funny about what you just said is I think I picked up a couple of things especially in the very beginning. You mentioned that, you know, I was really interested in helping people and ballet didn't allow me to do that, number one. And the second thing was that I really wanted to make an impact, or how was I going to change the world? And I couldn't do that on my own or whatever, right? And kind of scratching at purpose a little bit there, right? Like scratching at the inklings of what is my purpose and what am I trying to accomplish? The other thing I really picked up in your journey, and perhaps the traditional mindset would be that, well, she doesn't know what she really wants.
Right.
She's all over the place and has tried so many things. But I think the opportunity or the blessing in that is that maybe whether you do know or you don't know, you are not afraid of exploring and trying different things and jumping and trying to see what feels right in your body and what aligns with you. And like, I think a lot of people don't perhaps even feel that could be failure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my own parents said that I was getting nowhere and that I just was jumping from one thing to the next, like in a sideways direction. But I knew that I was moving forward because I was getting clearer and clearer on what it is that really lit me up. And I think that's why I'm able to become happier and happier in my career and in my life, in my family, everything, because I know that I get to choose what I want to create and we get to figure that out as we go.
I love that. So I have, again, in preparation of this podcast, I have a handful of questions that I wanted to dig into.
Okay.
Mostly around entrepreneurship and finding purpose and transitioning. So we'll just kind of navigate through that. But I definitely want to hear this is why you're on the podcast. We're going to hear your perspective, but I really want to get into the challenge with purpose and, all the work you do on purpose. So let me just kind of start with this. In my opinion, and again, specific to entrepreneurship, I think that most people who start businesses or become entrepreneurs do something or they're excited about creating, they're excited about building something. It could be fun for them or really, really exciting. And so they're caught up with this idea. Often it's out of need. So like I have to build a business to make money, or I have to pay my bills, or I have to start a company to take care of my family or what have you, right? In my opinion, it often doesn't happen out of some like universal calling of purpose.
Yeah.
It has to do with what I just said. Like, I just want to have a lot of fun and I'm attached to this idea and let's see what it can become. Or I need to make money and so I need to open this business or that or this. And so it's not often found, perhaps in the heart or in the soul or in some foundational purpose. So what do we do with that? Now, and I struggle with this as well. This exact thing happened to me. And so you achieve some success, you fulfill the need that you think that the business creates for you. But now you look back and you step back and you reflect and you're like, okay, this is not fulfilling my purpose. Now, I also want to conditionalize, and I'm saying this on the podcast publicly, which is why I have you on the podcast today, is that I don't know what my purpose is.
All right. Okay.
So you know that you're not serving your purpose, but you also don't know what your purpose is. And I actually, I know that there's a lot of people in my community that experience this, but I think that there's many more that I don't know about that are experiencing this too. And that when you're in that transitionary period of how do I get past or maybe move on from the architectures that I built to potentially looking for my purpose. And you said it in your history that sometimes you just had to quit. Like I have to start from scratch and I have to pivot. Sometimes you can't pivot. Sometimes you can't just drop everything and leave. Like I have I have to take care of the infrastructure that I built, perhaps, or I have to take care of my family. I can't just stop and go be a painter in the Himalayas, whatever it may be. So I'd like you to talk to us about what's going on there, what's going on in the psychology. Why are we in this situation, or how do we get through it?
Mm-hmm.
I know that was a long-winded question, but
I love it. It's
yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
I first want to acknowledge the people who are in that place where they don't know what their purpose is and they're trying to find it, because I think that's one of the hardest places to be emotionally. When we are on purpose, we are our happiest, right? We feel like we're making a difference. We feel alive. When we don't feel that, it's actually almost worse than just doing something we don't like, because no matter what we do, we don't feel fulfilled. So I want to acknowledge anyone who's there and tell them that it's okay. You're going to find what you like. Just because you're asking the question, it means that you are trying to find it. So the next thing I want to say is that I believe you are always going after your purpose, but we don't really realize it. Every time that you feel those little bits of happiness, that little bit of excitement in an idea or something you do, even just one interview that you do on a podcast, right? Like, even if the podcast isn't the ultimate purpose, there are moments within it where you can find your purpose and feel it. And so I think that everyone is tapped into it all the time. They're on it, they can feel it, but it requires really paying attention to those times where you're happiest. And then you can lean into it and see, okay, why did this make me happy? What was good about this situation, right? Why did I like coaching these young kids, and what was hard about it? And once you realize the parts that were your favorite, you just keep following the things that make you happiest. And what's crazy is once you do that, people will start to come into your world that you didn't expect, and opportunities will start showing up. And now, instead of just ignoring them because it has nothing to do with you, you might have thought of those things a little bit in your journey because you've tapped into it. And so now when these opportunities come, you recognize that it's something to explore. And as you explore, you become more and more of yourself. I believe it was David Bowie who said that growing old is the process of becoming yourself, who you really are. And so I think that that is part of our purpose as well, is to find who we are, because as we do that, we can inspire others to find who they are. And I also want to say that I think the purpose is to find the core purpose. I think that everyone thinks that the purpose of life is to just reach ultimate happiness and success and achieve everything you want. But you can achieve any physical thing in the world. You can make money in any way of the world, and you could not be happy. So it's about really figuring out what makes you feel fulfilled and chasing that.
And tell us how the law of attraction or I guess laces into all this.
Love that.
How have you applied that?
Yes. So the law of attraction is basically that whatever energy frequency you are, you attract exactly the same frequency to yourself. And it is possible that you can manifest anything that you want in this world, right? If you want to be a big banker, you could be a big banker. You just have to align yourself with it, practice, and get there. However, I believe that there's a nuance to manifestation, because you can manifest anything, but you might not be happy. You might be manifesting things that aren't for your highest purpose. And so if used incorrectly, manifestation can harm you and keep you from your joy. So what I really want to recommend is that instead of just trying to think about what you think you want, just lean into those energies of happiness and love. It might mean that you want to do more of a hobby at home, and that might inspire some other wonderful idea for a business or an opportunity, right? So instead of just thinking about something you want and tapping into it, again, really leaning into the things that make you feel alive and allowing that to help you manifest the things that really are right for you.
And so another thing that I think about when I think about law of attraction is that is it that when we feel like we're aligned with what we want and we don't get it, is that mean that perhaps we're not ready for what we believe we want?
Great question.
Does that make sense?
there are times where you might not be ready for something, right? Like, let's say you want to have a certain number of people listen to your podcast, and you do everything to make that happen, right? Not saying you do, but let's say someone does. They have like a number goal in their head, right? They want to make a certain amount of money and it doesn't happen and they've done everything. It could mean that they're not ready for it, but it could also mean it's not meant for them. And so I believe that that's actually a higher energy in the universe helping to direct you, because if you end up in a place where you manifest something that isn't for you, you might drain yourself more. And so there's something bigger that's waiting, and that can help steer you.
Well, and again, to stay on this sort of spiritual conversation, I have this analogy, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, about the Buddha and the battlefield. And so let me explain this analogy is that in the work of, personal development, we talk a lot about inner work, how to create and form the outer world from focusing on the inner world. And really often when we talk about our inner world, we're talking about like surrendering. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then on the other side of the equation, we're high achievers. We want what we want. We believe we can manifest. We often are doers and not, human doers, not human beings. And there's a lot of context to this, right? Then we have all this conflict. Like we have this outwardly world where we're trying to go create and achieve things, and then our inner world where we try to meditate is like, okay, just learn how to surrender. And so personally, I find that incredibly confusing. Okay. So how do we reconcile what we want without action? And I think that, and the reason I ask about this is that going back to purpose, mm-hmm. is that if I hear you correctly, is that a purpose is very heart-centered, intuition-driven, inner self. But often, starting again with my first question about we all end up doing these things for whatever purpose we start them, and we're just doing, mm-hmm. But yet they're misaligned. And so there's this difference between what's going on in the inner world and outer world, which is what I continue to try to reconcile. So
perfect. There's a lot to discuss here, and I love it. So the first thing I want to say is that the first way to start marrying the two is whatever you feel while you're in meditation, right? Maybe it's gratitude, joy, peace. The first step is to learn how to get into that state when you are conscious in your daily life, when you're having breakfast, when you're walking down the street. It's okay, I remember what it felt like when I was in meditation to feel so peaceful. Let's see if I just tap into that right now when I'm in my daily life. And so you start to bring in those very high, happy frequencies and energies. The reason why you do that is because automatically you create a ripple effect. Others are happier. You start making things work better for others. That's just a tiny thing that we don't even realize we're doing by just having that discipline to meditate, to tap into something better than where we are, and to sustain it throughout the day. Now, when it comes to taking action and having the purpose, that's where it gets more subtle, right? And we love to have clear answers of this is
we
what
sure
you
do. We like
right?
to name it, and we like clear. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
We like to touch it.
And that's why it's harder for people to achieve, because it requires patience and a level of faith. I used to have no faith in the world. Just 4 years ago, I thought the world was out to get me. Honestly, I had, taken on that programming and things like that. But I had just said out loud, I just want more faith. And I didn't know what that meant. And I don't mean faith in a religious sense. I mean it in believing that things will work out for you, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you believe something will work out for you, no matter what, you'll find a way to make it work. And so I kept moving towards this feeling of things going well, of believing that things will work out no matter what. And so as you do that, now you understand, okay, there are these energies, these really positive high frequencies while I meditate. I know that I want to do these things. And the next thing is the action that you are inspired to take right now does not have to be the final biggest action that you will take at the peak and culmination of what you feel is your purpose, because we cannot take that step yet, right? Life can be a little bit frustrating because it requires that patience, because it is education. People don't always want to be in school and learn. They want to just enjoy. And we get those times where we get to enjoy what we've learned, but we get to embrace that life is a school. It is an opportunity to learn. So whatever you feel inside is the next step. That's your next step. And once you're in that next step, you will see what the next one is after that. And then retrospectively, you'll see what the purpose was in all of it. But it's almost hidden on purpose, because the process of you finding it is where you become your best self and you learn how to teach others to go through the same process.
At the leadership level, we talk a lot about purpose, right? Like running a business, perhaps even with your clients. Often we talk about this word purpose more than perhaps everyday life when we go to the grocery store. I think that people expect this question to be asked and have some sort of framework around it to give people guidance, perhaps, and why are we doing what we're doing? Where are we going? What is the goal of our business or our time that we spent, et cetera. But when you get into everyday life, perhaps in the life of an everyday employee who's actually very happy, they don't get that question of what is your purpose?
Right.
And if you do ask, they'll probably say, well, I just want my kids to be really happy, or I want to make sure that my mom is well taken care of, or I want to make sure that my wife is cared for and has a house over her head, or I want to make sure I have a 401k when I retire. And I don't want to undermine those things, however, sometimes people could think that's like too simple, but I don't want to undermine those things, right?
Yeah.
Like your purpose could be, I want to change the world. I want to touch 7 billion lives, or I want to, end world hunger. So like there's a very big extreme differential about purpose. And so the question in all of that is, do we have to be able to say what our purpose is, or can purpose be a feeling?
Great question. Purpose will always exist, no matter what, whether you're aware of it or not. You are doing something in this world. So think about it. If you want to create world peace and you have a group of people who say that they just want to make sure their kids are happy and their parents are happy and everyone's healthy, they are perpetuating world peace by prioritizing their family's happiness. And so even though they don't see it in the bigger scheme of things, their purpose might be to be a part of that bigger vision. Even though they themselves don't need to be conscious of it, it might be that they're subconsciously aware of it on some level at their soul, if we're going to go to that place. But I truly believe that everyone, no matter how seemingly big or small their purpose is, if it's coming from a positive place, if your true intent is to spread joy, happiness, love, good feelings, then you are on purpose, no matter what.
And I guess if you don't listen to anything that we just talked about and you just tuned in right now, and in a couple of steps, if I was stuck in my head and I don't know what my purpose is, but I want to clarify what my purpose is, what are some suggestions you have, or what are the questions I should be asking myself about how do I define what my purpose is?
Perfect. Very first thing is to just sit down and put everything to the side, put everything away, give yourself some space to think and just be. And for a second, pretend that nothing exists, that no one has told you what to do, you've never heard of anything. And just ask yourself what it was in the past month that made you happiest. Like, when were you your happiest in the past month? And then just look at that situation. It might have been when you were with your partner or your kids, right? And so whatever it is that makes you happiest in this moment, you get to focus on that and say, okay, I'm going to find my purpose through whatever it is that makes me happy right now. And you're going to just allow the rest of it to become clear to you. So for instance, there were many times where I was in jobs where I was miserable, right? And so I would be at home, I'd be tapping into what I wanted, and then I'd go to a job and I would feel drained, which I know a lot of people do. And so that is just part of the, it's like exercising.
Is that part of the life experience, or is that like the resistance of that is sending you a message or a signal?
It can be everything. Of course, it gives you signals and messages, but what I really believe is that if you're in a situation that is not good for you, you have something to learn from it, right? Even though it's not fun, right? It might be teaching you to stand up for yourself, to say that you deserve better. It might be that there is someone in that situation that you're supposed to teach something to. And so whenever you're in a situation that you don't like, if it's a job you don't like, a relationship, anything like that, just say, okay, what's the lesson here? What am I supposed to learn? And then, okay, what do I like? And using those answers, trusting that you will find something as you keep asking those questions.
I love that. What are you seeing going on in the coaching and the clients that you work with right now? What are some of the common themes that people are perhaps asking you or struggling with?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of people, they just know that they want to help others. They know that they want to make a difference, right? And there are these like,
I want to help others and I want to make a difference. Like that's...
Yeah, it's these phrases that everyone knows internally they want, but they don't know what it looks like. They can't see something tangible that means make a difference. And so what I love to do is to help people just really first look at what they feel their mission is, which is their purpose, right? But how you find that mission is truly, okay, let's look at my life experiences in the times where I really felt like someone's life changed a bit, right? Because if you want to make a difference, we have to go to one person, right? You have to make a difference one person at a time. So in your past, when was a time you did something that someone was changed? What were you doing there? Okay, go deeper into that. I believe that people have these phrases as a calling. It's sending them in the right direction, but it requires them to really humble themselves and look at themselves honestly and say, am I really making a difference right now? No, I might not be. And maybe I'm not making as big of a difference as I would like, but there is such a thing as an educational period where you get to grow yourself and you get to learn and you get to see how you can better yourself internally to be the best person you could be and to bring the most value to everyone you know. And in that process, you will be scattering more value as you yourself are doing it. It's like the dust that, sparks off of you. So that's what that process looks like. But really, everyone just wants to make a difference, and it's about finding what that means for you.
I love that. What are you most afraid of?
I like this question. I am most afraid of not keeping my discipline to what I believe is good for me, right? Like I have disciplines of eating certain foods and meditating and doing things that I know will uplift me and teach me. And my fear is that for whatever reason, I will not have that motivation for a certain period of time. But I also know that I know myself and I know that I will find my way back just as everyone does.
Sure.
So in essence, I'm truly confident that it'll work out as it's meant to.
What is your daily routine or what is your disciplines that keep you sort of mentally healthy, physically healthy, performing at this level, connected, listening to intuition, all of those things?
Great question. I always struggled with finding a routine because as a dancer, it was just discipline all the time. So whenever I tried to make a regiment for myself, all of a sudden I would just disappear. Like the spiritual side of me would just go away and I would be a robot going through the motions, even meditating.
Interesting.
So I realized I can't be so hard on myself and strict. And I actually learned a technique from a coach named George Bryant. He is a wonderful person. And he taught me that you can have a floor and a ceiling to any discipline that you have, right? So if you want to meditate, maybe the floor is 5 minutes of meditation a day and the ceiling is an hour. And that way, even if the world is falling apart, you know you can sit for 5 minutes and do it. That was the beginning for me. It was, okay, I can have this very bare minimum thing I can do across the board. So I did it. I started drinking more water, started eating fruits and vegetables. I definitely start my day with, I get ready and then I get dressed and I do my meditation, and it might be 10 minutes, it might be over an hour. Yep. And what I listen to and do internally is always different, right? Sometimes I'm listening to peaceful music. Sometimes I do a guided meditation. Sometimes I'm listening to chanting or doing chanting myself, right? All of that good stuff. But once I do that, I tap into myself, my highest self in that process. And then I remember any of the seemingly important or worldly things that are going on, there's something bigger. So let me always look for that bigger picture. And from there, I can start my work for the day, but always, whenever I'm getting a little tired, I step out, I have a snack, I drink water, I read a book, because I remember I'm not living to work, right? That's not what my life is about. My life is not about work. I was always working so much because I didn't feel worthy and I wanted to prove to everyone that I was worthy, so I would work. That's not why I exist. So whenever I feel like I'm overworking, I step back and I just exist for a little bit. Maybe you take a walk, take a bath, watch a documentary, read a book, anything that makes you just remember that you're a human and you don't have to do something to exist. You're allowed to just be, and then you can get back into doing things. So that's what I like to do.
That was a really beautifully answered question. I mean, no one's ever answered that. And I asked that question almost on every episode, and no one's ever answered that. And for me personally, like, I punish myself. So let's say, for example, you tell yourself tomorrow I need to meditate for 30 minutes and I got to work out for half an hour or 45 minutes, and you don't do it, or you're 10 minutes short, the ego and the mind, or the judger, comes out and says, you said you were going to do 30, you did 25. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how critical I can be of those things. And you're not starting out with a good rhythm because you're already letting yourself down in the littlest way. And there's nothing to do with commitments or making commitments. It's just not allowing space. And I think what I'm hearing in what you're talking about is the commitment is to do the meditation. And so whether it's 5 minutes or 1 hour, letting your body, letting your intuition flow through that process seems easier. And I don't like to say that word because it's not that it's easy, but it's more in alignment, right? It's less mind. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
And it stays focused on staying in your higher self. And all of this rhythm and routine and discipline we're talking about is really to get us into our highest self. Right. So how we do that in the most efficient way is what we're all talking about, whether that takes you 5 minutes or 30 minutes, right? So yeah, that really connected with me, and I've never heard anyone say it the way you said it. So that's cool. I like it.
Thank you. What's really cool too is once you start to treat yourself that way instead, you realize how you can be a better coach, because the way you treat yourself is the way you treat your clients. And so I used to be disappointed if my clients didn't do what they said they would do. And not necessarily like I was disappointed in them, but I really want them to succeed. And so I would even get sad if they didn't do something. And now that I understand the process of being graceful with myself, giving myself grace, having that space, like you said, just really allowing myself to be a person, a soul existing, and not some machine or robot. My body is my tool that I'm going to manipulate. I allow it to just take its time. Once I did that, then with any client, I know that even just them doing a tiny thing, right? Like 1 minute of meditation, they're better off than they started. So now I don't worry about exactly what they said. I know if they're in the right direction, and then I trust that they will get there.
I love that. As we wrap up, final question is for you, what does it mean to live a rich life?
To live a rich life means to have a life full of love, just a full experience, to feel fully alive, to be surrounded by people who you truly connect with, who you truly love, who inspire you to want to do things, be more, do more, where you feel like now you're more connected to even more people in the universe and just feeling your most alive. To me, that's living a rich life.
Oof, I love that. Such a good answer. Well, Anna, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. I highly recommend everyone reach out to Anna, listen to her podcast. We'll put her podcast link in the show notes. It is called the Premise of Purpose podcast. I'm sure you can find it on Apple and Spotify. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So definitely reach out to her. Again, thank you so much. And really, really great conversation, and definitely connected. So appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.